Hello, everyone. Welcome to That Geek Show, the only show in the planet, Maggie, that puts you face to face with the experts, where you can come in, get advice on your own business right here from world experts. And today, we are going to dive in specifically on how to build your brand, your own personal brand, and turn that into a movement. And we're talking with one of the top 30 global gurus, right, Simon?
Apparently so. Apparently so. Yes.
They named you, right? Oh, sorry. Blah blah. We're already here. There we go. So they named you top 30 global gurus in the world, right? Right after Donald Miller.
Right. I don't know how they come up with those lists, but it's nice to be included for sure.
So you and I know each other for like 6-7 years now, I believe. And you are the person who wrote this fantastic book. And
Yes.
in this specific fantastic book, there is personal mission that you gave me about 6-7 years ago. And it's even more applicable for today, which is using technology to scale intimacy. And this is what you and I really, really connect on, is that emotional connection that businesses and brands need to do. And so there's a little story of how you got to become a We First person. So do you want to share that a little bit? And then I'm going to share that part of your TED Talk, because it's amazing.
Oh, sure. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining, and appreciate the opportunity to share some thinking, and hopefully it'll help you and your personal brand to build your business and so on. I've spent 18 years as an ad guy, so I'm Australian, which is why I sound funny. I worked in agencies like Saatchi and Saatchi and DDB in Sydney, and then, really learned my writing crafts over in London at agencies like Lea Stellani and Saatchi. And then I worked on Nike as a writer for 5 years at Wieden, up in Portland, Oregon, Wieden and Kennedy, which is their ad agency. And then I ran Motorola Worldwide as their worldwide creative director. So I spent a long time in the ad business. I then was a freelancer for 6 years, was out there troubleshooting for brands of all sizes, startups all the way through to, global corporations, really helping them get their messaging right. And then, as Ifat kindly mentioned, I wrote a book that came out that was all about how brands and consumers use social media to build a better world. And for the last 7 years, my company has been doing that, working with all manner of companies, from startups, literally a founder at a kitchen table, through to Tom's and Timberland and Cliff Bar and Seventh Generation, and also very large corporations like VF and Sony Pictures and SAP. So just a lot of experience in building a muscle around how to help brands really define what they stand for and how to share that message in a way that's going to drive growth. So that's my background, yeah.
Which is, fascinating, because all those brands, it's very, very hard for them to become purpose-driven, right? They're very much bottom line driven. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's a balancing act. I think if you're, listening to this chat and you're a solopreneur sitting at your kitchen table with an idea, or whether you're the CEO of a global corporation, you've always got a tension between bringing in enough profit to keep your business going, but also wanting to make a positive difference. And for a long time, they were seen as sort of an either-or proposition, but increasingly, for a lot of reasons we can talk about, they're now, two sides of the same coin.
Totally. So before we dive in, I wanna share a few things. First of all, you guys can come in and interact with us live, face to face with Simon. All you have to do is go to That Geek. You can see that right there, amthatgeek.com/live, and you'll be able to click a button, join us in the conversation, and we're going to show you exactly how to do that. We already have a few people in, so that's exciting. And I want to show you guys this part of Simon's TED Talk, which was very, very touchy to me. We talked about that a little bit before. Let me know if you can hear that on the stream, because I want the people in the show to hear that as well. So before we get there, let's see. There we go. So I'm going to make that big, fresh. And we have a commercial, of course, because we're not logged in. We're going to skip that ad in a second. And there we go. Let me know if you can hear it.
Because I'm miserable. I have everything, and I have nothing. I'm that guy, the me first guy. It was 4 years ago, just after 7 in the morning, and I was in my house in West Los Angeles, and I walked into the kitchen in my boxer shorts with bed hair, and sitting on the white tiled countertop was an answering machine, and it was flashing 5 new messages, which is strange early in the morning. So I pressed play. First message: Simon, please pick up the phone. I know it's late. You have to pick up the phone. Second message: Simon, it's Mum. Where are you? I know it's late. You've got to pick up the phone. Dad wants to talk to you. Third message: Simon, it's Justine. You have to talk to Dad. Pick up the phone. Fourth message: Simon, where are you? You have to pick up the phone. Talk to Dad now. Final message: Simon, Dad died. Call us when you wake up.
So I am getting chills, Simon, because I was telling you I'm seriously getting chills. I'm here in the U.S. My parents are in Israel, and when we were talking 6 years ago, we were talking about how social media and transparency and social care. We had the Arab uprising at the time. People were getting involved in social causes, and we were so optimistic as to how the world can become much better. And I'm watching TED Talk today, your TED Talk, and I'm like, wow, do we have to get to a point where a personal crisis happens to each and every one of us before we move from the me first guy to the we first people? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if people watching can relate to this, but for a long time I'd lived a version of success that I thought was appropriate or was expected of me. And like a lot of Australians, went all around the world trying to, be successful, win an award, get a certain job or whatever. And, you just go about your life not having the benefit of a perspective on who you really truly are and what would make you happy and fulfilled. And in my case, sadly, and I'd probably say with some embarrassment, it took a crisis of my dad's passing suddenly to sort of stop me and allow me to get out of my own way. Because I think a lot of us, when we're trying to face a personal decision like this, what we should be doing with our lives, what is our purpose, we retreat to our heads. We kind of try to rationalize our way through it or think it through or put it down on paper in some way. And that makes us feel safer or okay. And this is just my personal experience. I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but I was professionally bored at the time. And then my father passed. And for the first time in my life, I stopped. I was sufficiently destabilized and just emotionally kind of at sea, where I was just, I'm not going to try and solve this. I'm not going to try and make it okay. I'm not going to think my way through it. I'm not going to retreat to being rational about it. And I just, for about, 4 to 6 weeks, was kind of, just really confused about everything. And what started to emerge was, well, what am I really looking to do and what's really important to me and so on. So all of that is to say that I think to get to a point where we need to think of the collective, to get off sort of being focused on ourselves and thinking about the role that we can play in a we first sense. I think some people come to it consciously, some people come to it from a crisis point of view, like in my case. But either way, I think what I've learned is when you do commit to making a contribution, it's actually ultimately the most selfish thing you could do, because that's how you find fulfillment. I used to think fulfillment was when someone would give you an award or you get external recognition. What I've learned is that fulfillment is an inside job. You actually fill yourself up by what you give to others, rather than get filled up by what others give to you. And that was a very basic lesson in hindsight that I just had to learn the hard way. So, that was the journey in my case.
So we're looking at what's happening today. and you know, we find that it's more still of the same, right? Like of what happened before 6 years. 6 years ago was even better than what it is now, right?
Yeah,
With all the fake news and all the me, right? Like my business, my thing. Where do you think we went wrong?
I think that you and I were both sort of players, early players in the social media space. And like a lot of people, we were very optimistic. We thought, wow, people can connect anywhere in real time all around the world. And especially, you know, citizens can talk to institutions like government, consumers can talk to brands. And as a function of that dialogue, you know, that things could get better. And we'd say, well, this is what we need, or this is what we want. And companies and institutions would respond. I think, unfortunately, you know, when you command eyeballs so powerfully like social media does, you have a choice. Do you serve the customer or consumer or citizen first, or do you serve the advertisers and the business model first? And I think a lot of us have seen, you know, those who are the leaders in the space have really chosen to make as much money as possible. And that's come at the cost of people's trust. I think people don't trust social media anymore. A lot of people have left Facebook, they've left Twitter, and I think we're all sick of seeing ads everyone's screens. You know,
yeah.
So I think that's what happened, and I think there always had to be a balance, but I think the balance went the wrong way.
I totally agree. And so now there's not a real space for people to be on, right? Like there's not a real, you know, you and I met on Google Plus. You know how I feel about Google Plus. And now what we're left with is Instagram influencers, Facebook and everything that's happening there, LinkedIn, which is a little bit more resume-like. So if a brand, you know, or if a small bit, or anyone, right, what a brand, personal brand wants to go and build a community, build a movement, where would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, it changes. Firstly, the challenge for a lot of people, especially if you don't have a marketing team helping you or the resources to do that, you know, the algorithms change. So what worked 1 month doesn't work in 3 months because, you know, the way that the systems are set up changes. And so firstly, that's one thing. The second thing is a lot of these spaces now are dominated by influencers and a lot of vanity metrics which aren't true. So when you look at things, you know, sometimes you think, well, how has that person got such a large following? Or how do I get such a large following? When in truth, a lot of it's done, you know, through bots and fake accounts and all that sort of thing. So that builds distrust as well. Right. But with those negatives aside, I think if you look at where the eyeballs are now today, you know, it's Instagram and it's Instagram stories. I think a lot of people have left Facebook, or in my personal life, I don't know what the folks who are joining us think, but I'm on there a lot less. And everyone I know seems to be on there a lot less. And my feed is full of so many ads all the time that it becomes less appealing. You kind of get on there, you take a look, and then pretty quickly you're like, well, I'm just someone's selling me something or whatever. So Instagram does seem the way to go. Twitter seems to be more of a news feed these days where people do get timely updates, but there's a lot of feuding going on Twitter. Like I don't see people having the level of dialogue they used to. When Twitter first started, we were all chatting with each other and everyone's, you know, all over it and so on. And then a lot of sort of, you know, fake accounts and, you know, vanity metrics got involved. Pinterest, I think, has died off and has become a sort of, you know, an e-com platform for a lot of brands where they sell stuff if you have a particular interest. So all of that is to say, I think, you know, you can build the most engaged following I see now is on Instagram and stories. But irrespective of where you do it, if you want to build your personal brand, it's all about showing up and giving the engagement that people are looking for, being there one-on-one, answering their questions and so on, and to be truly honor the spirit of these things, which is one-to-one engagement. Yeah. I think a lot of people are now doing it at arm's length. They're just treating it like a broadcast channel. Just put the information out there and just, you know, not really engage with anyone. And I think that's a problem.
I totally agree with you. I think because of the mistrust, it's much harder and much more costly to buy leads, use ads for leads, and then convert them and build that trust over time. Where today we have this technology that allows you this face-to-face connection and immediate trust building. But you have to do that on your own platform because there's no trust in the other platform, right? So if we're talking about building a brand and a movement, let's define what's that movement that you're referring to?
Yeah, I think each of us have a special gift to give. And I don't mean to sound woo-woo about it, but I think we're all here on this planet for a certain amount of time. And we're all uniquely qualified to do something. And there's something that you really passionately care about. The challenge is, well, how do you know what that is? Because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to see yourself from inside yourself. When I first started this process, I was sitting there going, well, I like the oceans. It's like anything. It just all sounds the same. Like, it sounds like a beauty pageant where you're just saying things about taking care of the world. What I realized was I'm a big fan of storytelling. I think storytelling connects people emotionally and so on. And I thought, well, what if business leveraged the power of storytelling and branding to have a positive impact? And that's what I got excited about. And when I thought about that, I was like, well, what am I really talking about? And for me, I was really upset about the global economic meltdown in 2008. Yeah. And the me first mentality, where Wall Street bankers were just lining their own pockets, and it had a huge knock-on effect to people's lives all around the world. And ultimately, I realized that was my enemy. My enemy was this me first mentality. I thought it was very destructive, very unkind, and really hurt everyone involved. And so for me, the flip side was this we first mentality, where you put the interests of the collective first. Now, that's just my opinion. Every one of us who is on this call have a different gift to give or a different thing that they're passionate about. And so what I'd encourage you to do, because, you know, we've done this work with some of the top executives all around the world on big companies and so on, is to ask yourself a few questions. The first question is, what is your enemy? What is that thing that annoys you so much that you bore your friends and family talking about it? You bring it up at dinner parties. It really makes you angry when you see a news story about it, where you just go, that shouldn't happen. It's not right. And then, because when you're not sure exactly what you're for, one of the most powerful ways to define it is to start by identifying what you're against.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for people to be like, I hate this, than I love that, right?
Exactly. And then the second question is, what are you the only of? Everybody on this call is uniquely gifted in ways that, you know, others aren't. It's incredible. I mean, you have talents and skills and a life journey and passions that no one else has. So what are you the only of? And just imagine what your friends would say. Your closest friends who've known you for the last 10 or 20 years. They go, oh, you know, Maggie or Robert or Michael, they're like this. That's them. And they can nail it, you know, in a simple sentence. And then
when you say that, it makes me, I'm the troublemaker. So like it's all in all my groups, in all the WhatsApp group, it's like, oh, not, you know, I used to be the Google Plus girl. Now I need to build a brand about troublemaking.
Well, no, but it's interesting. Let's explore that for a second.
Yeah.
The troublemaker actually plays a very important role. What you're doing is you're challenging the way people are currently thinking. You're asking questions they may not have asked. You're provoking discussion. You're pointing at possibilities or innovation that otherwise wouldn't exist. So I actually think your troublemaking is really designed to push people forward, to unlock new ideas, to encourage new thinking. And I think that all speaks to your passion for innovation and progress and forward momentum and so on. And that's why you're the geek. I'm that geek. You know, what is a geek? You're somebody who has a passion and love for technology and what it can do in our lives, the positive role it can play.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, so number three.
Number three is, when you're at your best, what are you doing? When you're at your best, what are you doing? Because you all have those days where you're like, damn, I was awesome today. I like that. I'm really good at that. Or other people may not recognize it, but I know that of all the people I've seen, that's one thing I'm really, really uniquely qualified to do. And the reason you ask these questions is that you start to see themes emerge. When you externalize yourself, when you put yourself outside yourself, because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar, when you answer these questions, you start to go, oh, this is what I care about. And for me, that's what happened. I started blogging for the first time, which I really didn't know what to do or what I cared about or anything. But I started to see that I was talking about business. I started to see I was talking about storytelling. I started to see I was talking about doing business in a way that's improves everyone's life, not just the person at the top. And that was the themes that emerged for me. When you answer these questions, when you start writing down what you care about, it might be different each day or whatever, but over time, you'll start to see, oh, wow, there's themes here that emerge. And then when you look at them, you go, of course, well, I've always been into that. I always care about that. And that's when you start to define your personal purpose. And it's about leveraging the skills you have to have a positive impact in that area that you're deeply passionate about. I mean, your purpose is why you exist as a person. So that's the point of doing all this work.
Yes. And what's fascinating about the work that you do is that you're trying to bring that personal story into big brands like Virgin and Tom's and Toyota, right? How does that work with big brands? Because the question I'm asking is because we've seen a big brand trying to jump on the bandwagon, Gillette, right? And totally blow it up. So, and what was interesting about the conversation with Gillette is that a lot of people started saying, like, I don't need you to be social or to care about anything or define my values because, you're only selling me shaving razors, right?
Yeah.
So where's the balance of like, no, this is what I stand for, and like, no, I don't care about what you stand for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors here. One is the folks that we're selling to now increasingly are millennials and Gen Z, these younger people, and all the research shows that what they care about is, are you making a positive difference in the world? Mm-hmm. Why? Because they look around and they hear about climate change and there's plastics in the ocean and a species of animals being lost and all these sorts of things, and they realize that business has a huge impact, and most of it has been negative for the last several decades. So they want to support those companies that are doing good. So back to your question about where's the balance. When you are actually trying to market your product or whatever you make, you can either lead with your product or you can lead with your company. What's important these days is to have a brand, to make sure your company has a brand, because as everything now goes e-com and everyone's buying stuff on their computer and that's how they order everything.
Yeah.
The moment you win or lose a sale is when they sit down to order and they go, well, do I put in your company name or do I not? Do I put in Nike or Adidas? Or do I just put in running shoes and I'll choose anything?
Yeah.
Like, your business will live or die on whether you're in the consideration set at the first moment someone goes to buy something. And so the reason you build a brand and the reason you talk about the role your company plays in the world is to make sure that you're top of mind when they're considering who to go and look for. Do they want to buy Nike or do they want to buy running shoes? The second thing is, I actually don't think brands can survive in societies that fail. I mean, if there's a greater wealth gap between those who have money and those who don't, more than ever. I think there's a lot of, the middle class and the society at large that's suffering now in ways that we don't know and we saw in the last recession. And I really think that business has to play a positive role because, we need a middle class to buy your products. We need people to have income to afford your products. We need to make sure our societies are functioning and stable. Otherwise, you'll be selling to people who simply can't afford, to buy what you're selling. So I think there's a number of different reasons. So you should build a brand and lead with the positive role you're playing. And then you should position your company and products as social proof of that commitment. So they buy your product because they like what you stand for.
And if you don't know what you stand for, answer these 3 questions, right? then you're gone. Yeah,
it's hard. And then typically what happens if you haven't communicated what you stand for, that information gap gets filled with misinformation, where people get to say the bad things about you or wrong things about you, or just misjudgment where they just think you don't care, or you don't care about the same things, or you just don't care at all. And that's equally damaging. And you see this with food companies that get labeled as, guilty of GMO, and they're the GMO company, or it might be this. If you don't actually control the narrative, the story around your brand, others will do it for you.
Totally. Just to let you guys know, if you are struggling answering those questions, then you have a few options. The first one, when you come to the website, thatgeek.com/live, you'll see to the right of the video, there is a link that will take you directly to WeFirstWorks. And I'm going to ask you what it is about in a second, Simon. But right there, there is a free webinar that walks you through becoming a personal brand. And it's talking about how to become a personal brand that everyone wants to build. And it's interesting that you brought that up, that article, and that webinar, is because there's a difference now, right, between just a brand like Nike and a personal brand. So let's talk about that difference for a second. And before we dive in, I want to remind you guys, let me see if I can find it. I want to remind you guys that we are about to move to audience interaction. So jump on in. If you're watching us on Facebook or on Twitter or on YouTube, come on in to imthatgeek.com/live, and we'll start taking your questions face to face. So what's the difference between personal brand and, would you call it corporate brand?
Yeah, a company brand. Well, you know, a personal brand is obviously a function of an individual. So you've got a brand, I'm that geek, or, you know, I've got a brand. So that's clear. And we, you know, when we define our purpose, it's like, well, why do we exist? What's our role in the world? When you're talking about a company brand, this is really, you know, you look at the company and say, well, why does the company exist? And no company was started for no reason. It's always interesting to me when we work with these major corporations. They're like, well, we don't know what our purpose is. And it's like, well, you didn't come out of nowhere. You know, the founder didn't just do it for laughs. So anyway, you know, a company brand is really why you exist and the role you're going to play in the world. And that allows you to explain what you make and why you make it, how you make it a certain way, what suppliers you work with, what sort of culture you build at your company, the way you market your products, the way you give back to communities and to non-profits. Why you exist informs all departments of a company. So your purpose on the corporate level informs your supply chain, HR and culture, products and product innovation, marketing, and then community giving. So right across the board. So the difference between a personal and a company purpose really is the personal purpose is focused on you, the individual, and it's why you exist and your role in the world. The company purpose is why the company exists, but it has huge implications across all different departments or divisions of a company, from, you know, supply chain all the way through to social impact.
So, and you're talking about, you know, technology. Hey, we're about to take your questions. So you're talking about technology, but you're saying that story transcends technology, and you still have to make an emotional connection.
Yeah.
How does a company or a brand make an emotional connection? Is it graphic? Is it video? Is it messaging? What is it?
Yeah, it's not so much the delivery mechanism, but the story you're telling. I mean, all the data shows from Edelman and other companies that consumers wouldn't care if 70% of brands disappear. Seven out of 10 companies out there could disappear tomorrow and no one would care, which is pretty staggering.
Yeah.
In which case, you better build some sort of bond or loyalty with your customers so that they want to see you survive. And the way you do that is telling an emotional story. And you see leading brands like Nike and others always tell an emotional story, and it gets a connection with you. Then again, you watch an ad from a brand which is all about selling at you, and you feel no connection whatsoever. Look at Airbnb, massive company, and they could have got out there and said, we're just selling hotel rooms and apartments for less. They didn't. They said, we're committed to universal belonging, and their purpose is to create a world where everyone can belong. And so they've done ads that talk about diversity and inclusion. They opened up free accommodation to Syrian refugees and the victims of the Paris bomb attacks. They've now got something called Airbnb Open Homes, where they're encouraging their hosts to open up their homes, their properties for free for people who are suffering from a crisis, an environmental crisis or a disaster or whatever. So this is all about very human stuff. Yeah. And so I think, as much as technology is very cool and connects us in new ways, we're all still human beings sitting around a campfire telling stories. And if you want people to pay attention to you when they've got 1,000 cat videos and Facebook and Snapchat and Insta to look at, let alone the real world, you have to have some bond with them. And that bond is emotional. It's not just transactional through technology.
So I love what you're saying. You gave a demonstration of what it's like to actually show your emotion and connect with actions, not just slogans.
Yeah.
Right? You were talking about actions that Airbnb was taking, which I'm sure weren't free for them, right? But they were more on the social good and actually standing for something.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So you know, and as a personal brand, I don't know how much we can do in on that scale in order to make that connection. Do you have any ideas for that?
Yeah, I mean, as a personal brand, in the same way as a company, you've got to walk your talk. You've got to bring your values to life. So let's say for you, the way you're doing it right, consistently is you're offering for free incredible knowledge and insights to help people build their own businesses and have an impact. You're going to events and, you know, offering guidance and advice to folks. In my case, you know, we do a lot of webinars, we do these courses, we do, you know, we are trying to help businesses succeed and helping them leverage today's market drivers around purpose and so on, because we want to scale the impact that they can have. We also volunteer, my company, all of the employees, we volunteer every quarter. We have done give free advice to nonprofits consistently for the last, you know, 9 years. And, you know, the way we conduct ourselves in our business and in our personal lives and how we contribute and give back is all consistent with our values of being, you know, we first in mindset. So I think it's always just a case of walking your talk. I mean,
yeah.
Think about those brands where you just don't believe what they're saying, or you see where they're trying to sound like they're doing good, but your experience of that company or its products has been the opposite. You just call BS. You just don't believe them. And so you've got to, what you say and what you do have to be in alignment.
Yes. So let's hear it from the guys. So Elizabeth, unmute and let's see if we can talk to you. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Really well. Thank you.
That's awesome. I love that quote about when you commit to making a contribution, that's actually the most selfish thing you can do. That is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually true. I don't mean to sound lofty in all of this, but we all have these different careers. We have different jobs. We have kids. We have family. We have this and that. Life changes around us. But at some point you sit back and you go, what was this all for? Like, why are we doing this? What was the point? Because eventually you realize no one really cares about you. Everyone just cares about themselves, you know,
Exactly.
to a large degree. And when you ask yourself that question, you go, well, what has this all been about? And I think one of the most powerful things I've learned, and I've had long conversations with Richard Branson and Bill Gates and Blake of Toms and Scott of Charity Water, and I've been lucky enough to talk to a lot of people who are successful. It really comes down to, did you give your gift? Did you show up? Were you seen? Because there's an alignment between who you are and what you do on a daily basis, so that you're living your truth. If you do that, to whatever degree you have an impact, my understanding of what they've shared with me is you look back and go, well, that was that. There was meaning in my life. I feel fulfilled because I was seen and I showed up and so on. So I had to learn this the hard way. You know, I had to be shocked into a new direction. But the most powerful thing I've taken away from the last 7 or 8 years is the more you commit to making a difference to others, the better you feel about yourself, the more in alignment you feel with why you're here, and the less you worry about what others are doing, how much money someone else is making, should I be doing this other career? You stop worrying about everyone else because only you can be you. And when you have that alignment, everything else drops away, and all that emotional energy and angst that you used to spend 30% of your head spinning around all the time falls away. And it's an amazing thing to do for yourself.
That is very true. I actually do have a question for you.
Please.
So tomorrow I'm attending a conference here in Houston about journalism and social media and its role in the social justice movement.
Right.
One of the things we're talking about is the role of compassion fatigue. Mm-hmm. What do you think that's something brands should consider, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic, because, you know, there's purpose fatigue, there's compassion fatigue, there's charity fatigue, And I think that's even more so true today than ever, because a lot of brands are talking about their purpose now. And after a while, you're like, oh my God, you know, I've heard enough of this. I think what you need to do in terms of compassion fatigue is that if you are trying to inspire compassion and get people to take action around it, I think you need to constantly bring a fresh mindset and innovation to it. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter whether it's compassion, purpose, charity, donations, anything positive. If it becomes one note, over time, people get tired of it. It just sounds like, oh, there's more of that. Oh, I know about that. I've heard about that. I think one of the challenges for everyone is to always share their narrative or story or work towards their agenda in a way that's fresh and interesting and compelling. And so to overcome compassion fatigue, whatever the compassion is in service of, social justice or otherwise, I think it's about, well, how do we mobilize people in new and interesting ways? How do we connect minds that otherwise don't talk to each other to unlock new solutions? How do we reward people for being compassionate in the context of social justice in exciting and in ways that are going to engage them? So I think it's about, you need to command people's attention and inspire them and engage their minds in the service of social justice, as opposed to saying, this is a terrible problem, we need to fix it, and kind of just repeating the same message over and over again, because people go, I got it, and I do or don't have money or whatever I can do to contribute, and it becomes one note.
That's a great insight about making it much more interactive, because I think a lot of problems in the social justice community is that there's this impression that all we do is spend our time screaming at people about how they should be better people.
Yeah. And to your point there, I would say, if you want to build a movement that has impact, your messaging or the engagement you need to create has to be based on three things. Co-ownership. So you don't own social justice. Every stakeholder in the conversation owns that issue. It has to be co-creative. So when you create content or messaging around it, you should engage all of those stakeholders, not talk at them in a sort of monologue type of way, but have a dialogue and engage them in the content. And then it should be collaborative. When you design solutions and ways that you want them to be involved, it should be collaborative. So if you, instead of saying, we're a social justice advocate and we're in charge and here's our voice and this is what you should do, and talking at people, as you say the solution is really something that we're going to do together. And we own this movement together. And so we're going to create messaging and engagement opportunities, and we're going to co-create those with you so that, you know, everyone feels a part of it and is much more likely to share it. And then we're going to be collaborative by nature. Every solution, every activation is going to be a collaboration between like-minded people. When you do that, then you can understand quickly that these are the dynamics that drive movements, as opposed to you saying, this has to be fixed, you need to do it, go. It doesn't work that way. No one likes being told what to do, you know.
Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I took a bunch of notes, and thank you. I'll let you know how we do.
Yeah, please. That's a very, very important issue. Critical.
So Maggie had a question. She had to leave, and she said, I want to ask a question about the life cycle of a company that is also in alignment with the values of the founder. She says, it's fascinating how the founder will influence the role of the company.
It is. You know, it's interesting, having done work for Virgin Unite and Virgin Hotels and Tom's, both of which have charismatic founders, Blake McCoskey and also Sir Richard Branson. What we found in our work is that, with good reason, a lot of companies do similar things. They make similar products, you know, and you could argue, well, there's not so much difference between them. But when you actually really interrogate it and do the work that we do at WeFirst, you often come back to that origin story, because a company is always a little bit, to some degree, that persists, a function of that founder, a function of their personality, a function of their values. So, for example, with Virgin, you know, I was lucky enough to go to Necker Island and do a week of teaching with Richard Branson and his team. And, you know, Richard wants to have fun in whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's a truly inspiring, charismatic, brilliant leader, but who also miraculously makes it fun on the way. So when you think about Virgin Airlines and how they showed up, or the Virgin brands, you kind of go, yeah, I can actually see that connection between his personality and what the Virgin brands are. The same with Blake at Tom's. Is a hugely empathetic and compassionate guy, and you saw on I think it was Jimmy Fallon, or when it was not too long ago when they announced a $5 million commitment to gun control. He's very, very emotional and hugely compassionate, and you see that. So there is a connection. Now, when you're talking about a 100-year-old company, obviously can change, and what it makes can change, and the industry around it and technology can change. But we've found there's always some connective tissue between the founder and the company itself. And if you're struggling to define your company purpose, one of the most powerful things you can do is look back to why it was started, the co-founder or co-founders, and really look to them and see, well, how is that lived on in the company?
Yeah, and it's fascinating, things that are coming out now, like Jeff Bezos, which was such an interesting idea, right? Like usually when someone is trying to extort a high position person, it's always on the down low, and Jeff Bezos goes like, hey, look what's happening to me. And that did not become a big deal, was it?
No, it's interesting. I mean, Amazon gets criticized a lot in the press for its work culture and things that I have no direct experience of, that has been talked about in the press. And, by his own admission, Jeff Bezos says that he's a pretty tough, hard guy, hard boss.
Yeah.
If you look at all the reviews, he's saying that, it's not an easy game. It's about every day is day one, and you got to earn it. And the way that the company is like that. It was interesting with this extortion situation. I think in some ways it is consistent, because the easier road would have been to pay off these folks who are allegedly blackmailing them. He's like, oh, really? You want to play ball? Well, let's take it up a notch. And I'm going to be willing to expose myself, literally and metaphorically, through the, and play hardball. So I think in a counterintuitive sense, it's no different at all. He's just a hard nut who's said, let's step into the arena together and see what happens.
And we're talking about transparency, right? Like this is what extreme transparency.
I would imagine those behind that extortion, and again, all the allegedly, all these acts have been done. When they saw that response, went, "Oh my God, what have we done? We have totally screwed up here." And then suddenly they're scrambling to protect themselves from a legal point of view. And it's always fun when you call out a bully.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of bullies, Cheryl, you want to jump in?
Wow, Cheryl, what did you do to deserve that?
She's actually fighting bullies.
Oh, okay. There you go.
There we go.
Hello, Simon. And
hi, Cheryl.
I'm Cheryl Hill, and my brand is Depart Smart. And my why is this beautiful boy. Tyler died a preventable death on a student abroad program. Our kids die more often studying abroad than in car accidents. And when a terrible, awful thing happens to our kids, I'm a host mom of 8 kids for 12 years, so I get how great it can be. Wow. They're often coerced and blamed and shamed in this process. And so I use my voice to fight the bullies. And I'm often seen as a subject matter expert on travel safety. And we are starting a movement. Our movement is Travel Heroes. And the question is, can you depart smart? Can the people you love depart smart? Because in this $7 trillion industry, policy simply hasn't kept pace. And most of us don't know how to safeguard ourselves. We don't know what to do to avoid risks or get help. Most of us are traveling uninsured. Tyler tried to dial 911 in Japan. The number is 119. He wouldn't have been able to ask for help even if he knew the number. And I couldn't get to him because my passport did not pass the validity rule. So for these past years, we've created and invested. I loved this is so validating for me. I co-own this with you.
Yes.
I would like to give you a 1 hour, and everybody on this program, a 1 hour pass, a VIP pass to earn your cape and your super skills so that you can travel the world and be your own hero. It is a co-creation where I walk you through the process of how to identify and avoid risks in 6 critical areas based on 500 sad stories. And the collaboration then is that you would come back to me and to be part of our travel safety movement to continuously improve so that we can create a world where people help each other travel safely. that it is challenging, even with a lot of press that I get, to convert that. We just launched a for-profit called DepartSmart.com, and we have a nonprofit called DepartSmart.org. I win tons of awards. I've been on every major CNN, Inside Edition, and yet, so far for the sales, I'm trying to get people to make this journey with us so that we have 300 people that have gone through our pilot and 5 life-saving stories. And so I see what you're doing. I've been through a lot of those types of incubators. I'm a Minnesota Cup finalist, Twin Cities Indy finalist, but I'm still like 3 inches from gold trying to save lives because traveling abroad is an exciting enticement, but we need to know how to help ourselves.
And the young man whose life was lost that you mentioned at the top, how did you know him? What was his relationship to you?
So this handsome guy is my son, Tyler.
Yeah.
And he was 16 when he studied abroad with people in Japan.
Right.
I asked the program specifically what their safety record was. They told me they hadn't lost a child in 50 years, but the exact student chaperones who took my son to Japan were responsible for Ian Phillips, who died a year before. So there aren't any laws or rules, and we think that our well-being is safeguarded by consumer protections, but they're not. You want a warning before you buy or fly anywhere, and you're not prepared. I mean, we've proven it, and more than 20,000 10-point quiz. I have a 10-point quiz that I gave to 10,000 people, and fewer than 3% can get more than 3 right. And more than 20,000 not pass. Yeah.
Well, let me answer your question. Firstly, I'm so sorry for your loss, and that's. But I am hugely respectful of how you've taken that incredible grief and channeled it into making a difference to the lives of others. So you have my enormous respect for that. To answer your question, I think you're trying. The mistake that might be, fixable is that you're trying to do it on your own. And what do I mean by that? We're not in the business of collecting eyeballs in and around our movements. We're in the business of collecting communities. And so what do I mean? You could partner. You've done a lot of press, which gets a lot of eyeballs, and you're doing a lot of outreach yourself. But you can partner with, I would imagine, either government bodies at a state or national level to build your program into what they do. Yes, that's one option. Another option might be to say, okay, if the government is being reluctant about it or whatever, you might partner with universities across the country and make it part of curriculums that are relevant, especially with all the programs they have, overseas exchanges and so on. Or you might have a media partner. You might do it with National Geographic or Condé Nast Travel or somebody. All of that is to say that rather than try and lead the charge on your own, which can be exhausting, think about how you can strategically line up those partnerships that will bring you the infrastructure and the exposure and the reach and the community that you want to reach far more quickly. And then suddenly your job shifts from individually kind of lifting every day, trying to get messaging out there, to brokering these different partnerships. So, you could sit down for an hour and think, I'm just going to brainstorm all the type of organizations I could partner with that are relevant to travel and safety when you travel. There could be youth organizations, the Boy Scouts. There could be media organizations, Condé Nast Travel. There could be government organizations, of which I'm sure there's so many. There could be anything that is really a platform that's relevant to travel, you could partner with. And then you do a hit list, and then about who you're going to approach in what order. And then you create a pitch deck, and it sounds like you've got a lot of credentials in the sense of you've got this very powerful story, you've got a lot of media exposure, you've had 5 lives saved, and you really position how this can be an asset to them, and then suddenly everything will open up for you on the strength of that partnership. Does that make sense?
I love your heart and your spirit, and the first thing that I thought when I started creating this nonprofit venture my background is in telehealth outcomes-based leadership. Okay. And I thought for sure they'll listen to me and they'll see this program I've done. We do have a partner, St. Cloud State University, who was our pilot project. Wow. But when we first started out under the Bush administration, we were encouraged to move a law. We moved a law. moving that study abroad transparency law actually torqued off the study abroad industry because they didn't want to be accountable for any legislation. Under the Obama administration, I was told legislation sucks, that we need a private solution to a public problem, and that I should lead this program. Then I was told the study abroad industry is such a small, minuscule 300,000, and I should go wider for the 87 million people that go abroad, start this for profit and create partnerships. I do have partnerships with AIG Travel. I have a partnership with Passport Health. I have a partnership with the Student Youth Travel Association. But so far, the work I've done has been charitable and it has not been revenue generating. So we're still trying to get that first, and it's a huge awareness campaign because people don't think that they don't know how to travel abroad in a safe and rewarding way until that terrible thing happens and then they're left unaware. So we are building that community and we are building those prospects. We've only just, our .com is only 2 weeks old. And Ifat said, I really want you to meet Simon. I think Simon can put you first in your mission to create a travel safety movement, and we are a nonprofit also. So I'm trying to build that community. It's a lot harder than it sounds, especially if you moved a law regulating the industry that you're trying to align with.
Right. No, it totally makes sense. And, you know, if you think about any movement, by definition, it's a collaborative exercise. And I think I would look at what, now that you have the assets with your .com coming up, a couple of things. I would think about how you could charge a manageable fee that makes the business or the nonprofit self-sustaining. Whether it's certification or whether it's $29 and once you've come to do the course or something like that. I know there's a concern there that it may disincentivize people because it's hard enough when it's free, but you know, you can't do it. You can't exist or grow with no revenue. It just doesn't make sense. The second thing is I would try to get a little bit clearer with the partners that you have about what the mutual responsibilities are in that relationship. So for example, if you're creating content and curriculums and things which allow people to travel safely, then they need to broadcast it and they need to, you know, put it to work and they need to share it. And I get the impression you may have partnerships, but they're not doing a lot for you.
I think Cheryl just muted.
I'm on accident. I want to thank you for those. That's really great. We're just getting started, and I'm going to focus heartily on your advice.
Okay, sure.
So thank you for jumping in. So next one is Leyland. Am I saying it right, Leyland? Am I? Just unmute yourself and just say, yes, you are. This is the right one.
I wasn't sure if you were muting people or not. So my name's Leyland Best. And I run Best Conceptions Broadcasting over here in Michigan in the U.S. Thanks for being here today. Obviously, you're one that's an impressive individual for all of us who market our own businesses. But I'm involved in a situation here. Maybe you have a little insight in this. I love the fact you brought up Richard Branson, because a good friend of mine in Italy is one of his Virgin Cruise Lines designers. And I totally agree with you with regards to how Richard runs his business and how he very much represents the brand that he's building. In the case that I'm involved in, I'm looking to partner with some individuals who are in the same niche that I'm in. And they have a very exclusive product that would really enhance what I'm doing. Not only that, but bring a lot of value to my own clients. But there's that little issue of having to deal with maybe moral or just plain world views between us or amongst us all that are varying on individual levels and various levels. Some we can overlook, others are very difficult sometimes to overlook. So how do you deal with a proposed partnership plan with individuals that might not truly and totally represent the direction that your brand is going in? Like you mentioned, making it very much in tune with who you are individually. When you start bringing that into the mix, how can you avoid the complications that could arise from that?
It's such a great question. Thank you. Because here's half the work that we do is undoing the mess that results as a function of not having that alignment in the first place. You're absolutely right when your gut tells you that this moment of tension you're having right now could be very consequential later on. And I will tell you, hand on my heart, whatever you're feeling right now will be magnified 100x 1 year, 2 year, 4 years down the track. And it'll take many forms, and you won't necessarily recognize this is the source of it, because it'll be disguised as, oh, do we go into this product line, or do we go into this market, or do we bring on this partner, or do we sell the company or not sell? All of those decisions are informed by the vision for the company, and the more aligned you are in terms of the vision of the company, the better equipped you are to, survive in a partnership over the long term. Because as we all know, a partnership is like a marriage, and I hear so many, train wreck stories where business partners come unstuck and so on. So the caution you feel is absolutely appropriate. What I would do in that circumstance, how many partners are there? Well, potentially.
Right now, it's an actual, there was an intent to form a distributorship with an owner of a product and a service, both an SaaS and actual hardware components. In that, there's a lot of contention between the intended partnership that signed the distributorship. The partnership doesn't actually exist in contract form yet. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff going on right there with the two who signed the distributorship that are like, we're not so sure we're working well together, and perhaps we should divide the distributorship amongst us. Yeah. I got brought into the fold like halfway through this organizational process, and yet they realize what I can bring to the table at such a higher level than what they've already started. And now I'm meeting with I've already met with the actual owner of the product and service. High praises for the stuff I've done already, just as actually a retailer in the space. But now one of the individuals has looked at me like, we should be partnered. I can't work with this other person. And I'm just stepping back. I don't want to involve myself in contractual negotiations at that level right now, because it's not solid. It's not very uneven ground right now. So I'm just kind of being a silent observer as things move ahead and working the retail end of things, because it can be profitable for me. But there's always that notion that they may want to drag me into this as a partner. And it's very exclusive, because it's a total North American exclusivity that I'm looking at, because it's an overseas product and service. And it's driving me nuts deciding what I should do next. So
I think you need a little short-term pain for long-term gain. And what I mean by that is, you're not getting paid to babysit these people and manage their relationship. That's not the business you're signing up for. And if I was in your situation, I would write down what I've observed as a neutral third party that has a pretty close line of sight onto what's going on. And then I would write out the tension between these other two partners. And then I would write out what I think could go wrong as a function of that. And say, before anyone puts pen to paper or signs a bottom line on a contract, I want to raise these issues, because if this is happening now, there's a very, very good chance that some of these things that I've listed here could play out later on. And not only will that jeopardize the company, it'll jeopardize friendships and relationships, and nobody wants that. And so by short-term pain, I would take the opportunity to say, I want to be both a potential partner and friend to us all in this moment, and say, by your own admissions, there's tensions, and these are potentially highly destructive to the great opportunity we have in front of it. And when you actually scratch that itch, when you rip that Band-Aid off, 9 out of 10 times, I find that, there'll be some gnashing of teeth and whatever, maybe some dirty words, and you're this and you're that. But when it all shakes out, it may be like, I don't want, these two partners don't want to work with each other, and he'd rather give the distributorship solely to one of the partners, and then you get into partnership with them, and it'll all shake out. But
that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, I agree with you, Simon. That's exactly what's going on. I think you've really confirmed the notions that I have, and the intent and direction I want to take with this, to kind of remain in that position and yet bring to light where I feel there's some serious issues with the entire process that's taking place. So I appreciate that, Simon, so much for your insight, because it helps me to realize that I'm on the right track. So.
Yeah, and just draw a line between where you are now and any further engagement with them, and say, up till this point, I want to offer you true value, and the best value I can give you is to call out this issue. So here's what I've observed. Here's what it could cost us down the road. There's no moving forward beyond this line until we resolve this issue, because there's a very good chance it's only going to hurt all of us. And just that stuff. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So, Simon, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, I do. And
Okay,
then
fantastic.
I'm running off to do a speech at a conference. I'm down here in San Diego, and it's funny running around doing this speaking all the time, because you never get to see anywhere you go. You get in a taxi, you get in a hotel, you go, and you go back. So I hope I get to see a bit of San Diego on the way to the thing. Anyway.
I keep trying to drag you back to Austin. Oh, come on, let's arrange something that you show up.
No, I haven't listened in a while. Yeah.
I know. So before we dive to the last question, I want to remind everybody, we are talking about a personal brand. And we're talking about how to build a personal brand, a human brand that everyone wants to help you build. And if you want to see that webinar right here, to the right of this video, there is, right there, there is a button that will take you directly into We First Works. And in there, you'll find plethora of courses and of information and articles and everything that you need in order to help you kind of like answer those 3 questions and really build a human brand that is a movement and not one of the 70% that everybody wants to forget.
I'll tell you about one of the courses on there, and it's $99. I mean, the reason we built We First Works is we had a lot of nonprofits and social entrepreneurs and startups coming to us saying, hey, we want the benefit of what you're doing, but we can't afford the consulting fees, which is a totally fair thing to say. And so we took all the learnings that we've had and our process that we work through with all these large clients and leading brands and built it into this course. And then we got special guest folks to come in and talk about their experience. So we have the head of environmental initiatives from Patagonia talking about how they define their purpose and how they bring it to life inside their companies. The head of strategy from Tom's talking about how they go about their business. Linda from lynda.com that sold her startup for $1.3 billion to LinkedIn that was then sold to Microsoft. And then solopreneurs too, startups as well. So it's all of We First experience. It's all of these amazing people's experience that we've got to know. And the whole idea was to help, if our mission is to help business become a force for good, we want to support those smaller businesses that are the future. And so that's why these courses are so cost effective, and that's why we put them out there. So please, you can define your personal purpose in one of the courses, or you can define your company purpose in one of the courses, and they're designed to help make you successful.
And they're very, very effective and valuable. Getting to get the insights from someone who's in the trenches with all those big companies can definitely save you years of trying to figure it out on your own. Yeah,
we've seen pretty much most things that can go wrong. I'm 25 years into doing this all around the world on very large from very small companies, and I've seen a bunch of stuff. Hopefully, I know they would be very, very helpful. We've seen a lot.
Yes. Stuart, my friend, unmute yourself and turn your camera on. I can't see you for some reason. There you are.
Yep, I'm on.
Hey, Stuart, how you doing?
I'm very well. I have a little bit of a different question.
Sure.
I'm in the planning and startup stage of a new launch, and EFAT and I know each other for years from Google Plus, so we're pretty used to this format. Using this format and distributing it across platforms live and also post-produced, to me, leads into my topic, which is half news about the topic. Here's the things you may not have heard of last week.
Mm-hmm.
And an interview probably with, it's cyber related, cybersecurity, cyber war, cyber theft, that whole cyber issue, which is so big.
Yeah.
And then lead into probably a political interview about what's being done and what's not being done.
Right.
From an income point of view, there's a separate, with a separate name, I'm going to try to create red teams and repair teams. So obviously my perfect client is the corporation, a corporation.
Sure.
That also can be, this all can be applied personally as well, but more likely the corporation is going to play a part. So my goal is to use this as the promotion and that as the product with different names on each one, but totally related and interlaced.
Right.
Is that a practical reality, do you think?
Yeah, what you're talking about is, well, firstly, it's a very critical issue, whether it's Jeff Bezos and access to his private data, or whether it's, you know, cyber terrorism, which is just a huge and increasingly important issue. So that's one thing. The second thing I'd say is, what you're talking about is a naming convention. Like, how do you connect, for example, the channel that you're using to promote what you're doing and the products that you're taking to market? And usually companies do that through consistent naming. So you might see, you know, FedEx, or, you know, FedEx X, Y, and Z. They have all these different products and services, but they're all, you know, prefixed by FedEx. The danger of having different names is, to your point, they won't connect the two as easily. So let's bad example. We say your show is called Cyber News or Cyber Update, whatever it might be. And then your products are called, you know, cyber services or cyber security or, you know, cyber systems. But you need that connective tissue visually in terms of your brand identity. So your logo and color palette and how your brand looks. But you also need it sort of from a language point of view, so that, and then you've got to connect them through the platform itself, so that when you put a program out there on Google Plus or whatever, and then they should be able to, like YFAT does, you know, you can click and go straight to wefirstworks.com. They should be able to click straight to either your .com page for your website that lists your services, or it may be click and go directly to, you know, an introductory call where you can talk about what you do for them and so on. So here's the thing, the greatest test is always, if you printed out every touch point with your brand, so the homepage of your website, your Facebook account, the collateral materials that you have, whatever you'd use to represent your brand, and stuck them all on a wall, would they look like a singular, cohesive brand identity, or do they look like 5 or 10 different things that are unrelated? And if they look unrelated, then you can imagine what shows up in the consumer's mind. They're just sitting there going, I got no idea who you are. Or the corporate executive is, well, I don't know, these guys don't even seem to know who they are themselves. So how am I going to get them to, you know, why would I trust them to take care of my cybersecurity? So
could I ask one more question?
Sure, of course.
I don't ever take that as an of course when I ask that question.
Yeah.
The domain is topic based, and I could make the broadcast and the service, as you say. I think you opened my eyes to the design issues here. So does the domain have to reflect the name? The domain for the site will be nationunderattack.com. That will be the site eventually. It's not active yet.
Right.
However, I could make the broadcast, which I think will be weekly or bi-weekly or twice a week. I'll make the broadcast, I could name it differently or name it the same as the Red Team. Or I am planning to make the Red Team an entirely different name, that whole service side of it, an entirely different name, because most of the major cybersecurity organizations and investigators use names that have absolutely nothing. They don't even have the word cyber in them.
Yeah, there's a lot of cryptic ones, and that's kind of, I guess, symptomatic of the services they provide, that everything's a little bit opaque. But yeah, I think you would need to have different names there, because Nation Under Attack is the broadcast. You could also, your domain name could be the same as your company name, but the program itself is called Nation Under Attack, the show. So it's sort of like the same way that, NBC has a certain domain name, but then has different programs. It's like a sub-brand within it. Because, yeah, you can't, I don't think you could have the name of your company, Nation Under Attack. It just wouldn't make sense. It's not that it wouldn't make sense, but it doesn't sound ideally suited for a company name. You know what I mean? So,
understood. Yes. No, I would not want that to be a company name. That's strictly a personal broadcast.
Right.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Good.
To think about
Okay,
as
great.
I go on here. And
Right.
I will be on your website, and I promise to absorb your material.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
last one. Michael Parrish, who said, of course Ifat is a troublemaker. So come on in, unmute yourself and jump in.
Hey, Mike.
Ty Simon, sorry, I don't know more about you, but I've just totally been enjoying every word you've shared in this interview. Yeah, it's right on. It speaks to me. And in fact, I think you helped me answer a question about this. This what is your origin story really? How's that really coming through in your, I guess, your leadership of what you're doing? And what spoke to me on that was that there's a power in our essence. That's my experience of in my therapy practice as a massage therapist.
Right.
I found there's only so many stressful thoughts. There's only so many stressful feelings. There's only so many movies you're making in your head, and when you run out of rope on those, guess what shows up? This incredible essence that each and every person seems to pour through them.
Yeah.
And when you thought sort of push me out on a limb to well, what could you do that would be useful? I fell on the topic of sleep and helping folks with finding better rest. And really what that is just helping them get back into that essence before they go to sleep and kind of restore themselves from that place. And when you talked about, coming from a place of fulfillment, I guess I would ask you this, in your own experience, is it really, do you have a sense of, in a way, of how you show up in a way, do you feel like it's kind of working through you? How is, and what could you say about that? Because part of sharing a new idea or coming out differently or making a contribution is you may not be thinking about things in the same way that people around you are, people who've been your friends or your familiar community. You may be coming out with something that really is unfamiliar and maybe uncomfortable to talk about, or in that way I feel challenged as I'm figuring out the storylines, to be comfortable with just what's coming through, regardless of whether anybody's agreeing with you and whatnot. So that's kind of if there's a question there.
Yeah, I mean, I had that direct experience. I think when we're all, sometimes athletes talk about it being in the zone. Sometimes, they might say a runner's high. I think there's those moments in time where all of us, we kind of lose sense of time, or we're not conscious of what we're doing. We're just 100% being, and we're kind of living our truth, whatever, and it's different for each individual. I think, if the question is, how do you share? Is the focus going to be sleep, or is the focus going to be helping people to channel what their truth is?
Well, the focus is really to let sleep kind of show you the way. Get the rest, and get the proper rest. Say no to the stressful thoughts and the unnecessary worry and the unnecessary suffering around it, and allow what else wants to show up. Now, I can see it in two parts, but it starts with the premise of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, rest is a powerful word because it implies both the physical rest that you're having lying, sleeping and so on, but also mental peace. Yes. And, it's a state, a way of being in the world where you're calm and you're centered and, you're attuned to the world around you, but it's not creating disturbances and so on. So I think there's something to be unlocked in the idea of making rest active. Like giving rest an active role in your life.
There you go. Yeah.
People think about it as where you switch off. Like I'm on during the day, and then I switch off when I go to sleep.
Right.
well, that's an opportunity to reframe that and go, well, actually, let's put your sleep to work.
Yeah.
And, you know, not only does it restore your body, but if you prioritize it with the same way as you do other things in your waking hours, like exercise and food, and you make it as active as those other elements in your life, then I think, you know, it's a powerful message to share with people. And, you know, the most interesting brand stories always have a bit of tension in them. Like, you know, we first is not in opposition to me first, or, you know, I think this idea of active rest is an interesting idea, you know, or the idea of putting your rest to work. You know,
there is a sense of claiming that for yourself,
mm-hmm.
and in some sense, like you're saying, you know, just sort of owning your sleep, you know, just like you want to own the other parts of your life.
Yeah. And I think if you could explore language in and around that, around the idea of, you know, owning your sleep, as you say, putting your sleep to work, active rest, these different sort of, so people go, well, what do you mean? It's got to be provocative. And they go, well, what do you mean? You go, well, you know, sleep isn't just there for you to recover so you can have the energy for the next day. Right. It can actually define your experience of life.
Oh, I believe that.
And, you know, on a mental, emotional, physical level, and you just break it down and say, the core idea is, you know, claiming your sleep and getting in an active role. And then you break it out and say, well, there are physical, emotional, and mental benefits. And therefore, to achieve those benefits, here's what you need to do, or here's now how you need to look at sleep differently, and you need to do X, Y, and Z, and so on. And then that becomes a program, and it might be...
Well, there is actually some biology to that. It's kind of about looking at how dreaming is actually working for you.
Right.
It's not just something that happens.
Right. And I mean, you know, I think sleep is probably one of the least, I think it's been studied a lot, but at least understood by general population out of anybody, out of any kind of, the same way that, you know, we're trying to go to Mars, yet we don't understand the bottom of the oceans. Right. We're studying our food, and we're you know, interrogating exercise, but we don't understand sleep. It's this gift right in front of us that no one has put to work yet.
Yeah,
so, you know, yeah, there's a lot of promise there, for sure.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
So Simon, let's wrap it up with the opportunity. You know, we started 6 years ago, very optimistic, and we saw all the possibilities of transparency and collaboration and connection. But I'm sure that in this area, these times of fake news, mistrust, you know, disconnection, there must be an opportunity for human brands that they can catapult them faster if they do certain things. What would you think that would be?
Yeah, I think the opposite is always true, and that may sound silly, but it's sort of like the stock market. When everyone's selling, you're supposed to buy, or when everyone's buying, you're supposed to sell. Yeah. You know, everyone is falling over themselves to digitize their lives. As consumers, we're living screen lives the whole time, as we are right now. Yeah. As companies and brands, we're backing out of data, and we're optimizing, A/B testing our pages, and all these different things. When I see all that going on, I go, well, you know what? The one thing that's really missing from this equation is the opposite, which is elevating the humanity of, you know, the experience of your brand. And so I find more and more technology is making business transactional. Yeah. And therefore, I think the need to be human and to make an emotional connection is more important than ever, and it'll allow you to stand out in more effective ways. And I think also at this moment in time, the opportunity, sadly, is the more you can have a purpose to your business that's going to have a positive impact, the more meaningful and relevant you'll be to people, because we're facing all of these challenges. You know, we've got a growing population. We've got a planet that's got a lot of problems now. They're going to show up in very, very real ways. You know, there's going to be more mouths to feed and less agricultural land. You know, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the IPC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that just came out, there's just a lot of very real things, and I don't mean to sound alarmist, but there's a lot of real challenges that we're going to face as individuals, as citizens, as cultures and societies. And the more your brand can play an active role, and the more human it can be, and the emotional connection it makes, I think the better positioned you'll be for success. And so that's a long way of answering. I think the opposite is true. As everyone is sprinting to more and more technology, and it's increasingly defining our lives, I think elevating the humanity of your brand and really making personal, heartfelt connections is really the big opportunity for companies out there. And we see that from our work. We see those type of organizations really getting traction where those who are just treating people like data points are not, you know?
Yeah. So are you more optimistic now or less optimistic than 6 years ago?
Oh, goodness. I think the promise of social media has not played out as it should have. I think, you know, to varying degrees, a lot of the big tech companies have milked for every cent it's worth and continue to do so at the cost of the power of these platforms. And where is that hurting them? Well, you know, in saturated markets like the US and so on, people are leaving Facebook in droves and millennials aren't using it anymore. I just think there's been a lot of missed opportunity there. And I don't mean to sound naive that people wouldn't try and make the most money out of new technology. They always have. But I think the very nature of this technology is such that it depends on people wanting to use it. Yep. And if people don't want to use it, you know, there's not a lot of money. There's going to be less money to be made.
Yes. So it's a great opportunity for all of you to start thinking of your brand as a movement that is not relying on social platforms that may or may not be there, might use your information or not use your information. Build your own movement and your own audience on your own platforms. Make a difference, make a good difference. There's plenty of great case studies on, is it We First branding or We First Works where all these case studies are?
Case studies of the work we do is at wefirstbranding.com. That's my company website, wefirstbranding.com. And then the courses that people can take are at wefirstworks.com. So the connective tissue there is WeFirst, but one is branding and one is works.
There you go. So there's plenty of information. Simon, you have been a well of good, good information. You drove a lot of people here into the right path, which is fantastic because, many times we go 1,000,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction, and then it's like, oh no.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for your great questions. And we'll see you on another show of I'm That Geek in 2 weeks. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Yvette. Thanks, everyone.